I'm joined by Ellie today, who I found out about from John Hanson. John Hanson, the UFO researcher. Now, we've already covered a little bit of Ellie's story, in particular when this thing came out of your nose in the mid-1990s.
That's correct.
An object which was examined by a professor at Manchester University under an electron microscope, and they didn't know what it was, and it has some extremely fascinating features on it for me. Now, you are someone who has had UFO experiences for a lot of years prior to that and after that incident. So we're going to talk about some of those incidents today, and Ellie's very kindly agreed to be interviewed. So if we just go back to your childhood, Ellie, just if we can start there, just tell us where you lived and what was it that you first noticed that led you to believe that there was something perhaps not normal?
It all began when I lived in West London with my parents. I was 13 years of age, and I got up one evening to use the bathroom. At the time, the house that I lived in, the bathroom windows were clear glass, they weren't frosted. And as I was standing, washing my hands to leave the bathroom, there was a very bright light over the dividing fences in the back garden with the neighbour's garden. It was probably 6 or 8 feet, a huge globe of bright light, and I was mesmerised by it. I stood and looked at it for several minutes, and it just shot straight up in the air, and of course obviously went out of sight with the roof that overhung the window. And the next morning it was still so clear that I mentioned it to my parents, and they said that I was probably imagining it, I was probably sleepwalking or dreaming, and I was adamant that I had seen something, and I was so frightened I actually wet the floor. And my mum did actually say at the time, you know, did you leave it too late to use the bathroom last night? And I said no. I was so frightened what I saw out the window, and she kept saying, oh, you're imagining it. And that's how I went through life with my parents. I had a vivid imagination, according to my mum and dad, and nobody believed anything I said to them. But that was the first incident that I saw that made me wonder what's going on. Like I say, 13 years of age.
Now, I think you've got a lot of knowledge of this phenomenon because you've looked into it, and you even set up a group yourself in the 1990s.
Yeah.
Now, there's something which some people might think is rather ghastly about what's potentially going on there. It's interesting to me that your age was, you said you were 13, and we know that things happen to women when they reach that age. That's when things change. Did it coincide with that in your life?
No.
No? Okay.
No, not at all.
All right. So
my parents just said it was puberty,
right.
Hormone problem, you
right.
know.
Okay.
But I know what I saw that night.
Sorry, no, I don't think you. I think you've misunderstood the question. What I'm saying is that some people allege that when people are taken, it's a genetics thing that they're interested in. Therefore, a girl of that age would be more interesting to them because they've just started being able to reproduce.
Yes.
So, do you feel now that that's? I know that's a leading question, perhaps, but has that thought ever crossed your mind?
No, because I don't know what it was I saw.
Right.
I didn't know what I was looking at.
Right.
You know, I was just a normal suburban teenager that got up one night. Always been told by my parents that I've got a vivid imagination. Things would happen, silly little things. I might see something, I might hear something, but I was told, oh, you're imagining it.
Okay, so would you like to give us the next thing that you can clearly remember?
It went very quiet for a long, long time. I mean, we'd see things in the sky, and my mum said, oh, it's nothing, it's probably an aeroplane, because we live relatively close to Heathrow Airport. And I've always been a child that's had very vivid dreams from as long back as I can remember. Even sort of, I think my mum recalled on one occasion when I was very young that I'd wake up screaming in the night, you know, and I'd say, oh, you should say, oh, you've had a bad dream. Never really remembered what it was that I dreamt about. But even to this day, I still dream often, I still remember often. And like I say, as I went through teenage life, I forgot about everything that had happened around my 13th birthday. Well, not my 13th birthday, the 13th year that I actually saw this. And got married to my first husband. Do you want me to explain all this? Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
What age were you when you had your next experience?
My next experience was more spiritual than, sort of seeing things, hearing things.
Okay.
And that, again, is something else that's always played a relatively big part in my life.
Right.
Because my mum's sister always claimed that she could sort of read teacups, and my gran used to read teacups and things like that.
Right.
So it was more spiritual things that were happening then,
Right.
like hearing voices, seeing things and whatnot. And it wasn't until the beginning of the 90s when we moved, when I got married for a second time, and we moved, that I got in contact with some friends via a magazine that I used to read.
Right, and what was the name of that magazine?
That was UFO magazine.
Graham Birdsall's magazine.
That's correct,
Right.
yeah, that's correct.
All right, and so you started taking the magazine.
I started, because...
And do you think this was linked to your what you saw when you were 13? That's why you had an
I
interest
think it was always in the back of my mind that,
Right.
what with seeing things in the sky and being told, it's probably just an aeroplane from Heathrow and things like that. I've always had an open mind on the topic. But like I say, I bought the magazine and I got really involved with it. I would reply to newsletters in the magazine, which is where I got to make a lot of friends, and decided that one day, well, there's probably people that cannot get to groups, and that I would start up a group, but we'd all keep in contact via the, computers, by mail, which is why I called it the Postal Network, because we used to write to each other with experiences.
Postal UFO Network?
It's UFO Postal Network.
UFO Postal Network.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that sort of time, early 90s, the internet hadn't quite got off the ground.
No, that's correct. And I'd only just got my first computer and I didn't really know how to use it.
Right.
But I tended to use it more for sort of the word processing side,
Right. Okay, so were there any significant events that happened before you had this thing come out your nose?
Only that I was married to a man who used to poo-poo the topic big time, and used to sort of really lay it on thick and make fun of me, and would put me in situations where, people would be worried, why is he doing this? Is he just trying to sort of make you look an idiot? Because one example, we were on holiday in Yorkshire, got family in Yorkshire, and decided to go up on holiday. And I said, Menwith Hills up this area.
Yeah.
I'd really like to go and see the golf ball structures.
Been there myself.
Yes, have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we went up soon after all the caravans and that had moved, and which is a shame really, because I wanted to see all the people that were up there, sort of protesting. And what does my husband do? He stands on the roof of his car with his camera and he's photographing and he's waving to whoever it was on the other side of the fence. So, and we get back in the car and he said, let's drive all the way around and see how big this place is.
Right.
So as we started driving past one of the side gates, something came out and it sat behind us as we did a complete 360 of the area.
A car came out.
A car came out.
Right, okay.
And when we got back to the point where the car joined us, it went back in that side gate, but it was on our tail all the time.
Right.
And coming back from that holiday is when the problem started, where I had people interfering with my mail, I had telephone lines down, my internet, which I was getting used to, and I was getting very frustrated because it was getting cut off.
Right.
And strange people outside schools, which I've later found out, one of which was, the vehicle was actually registered to the Ministry of Defence.
Right. So this is something which I discussed with John Hanson. So how did you notice that a vehicle was following you? What made you think that?
Dark glass vehicles.
All right.
Strange number plates.
Right. All right. And what would you see them on over more than one day then, or?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I had a car sitting outside my house one evening, a black Range Rover with dark glass. And my father had driven past the end of my road and said, oh, there's a big car outside your house with black glass. Have you got visitors? I won't call in if you have. I said, no. So I went and had a look out the front room window, and sure enough, there was a big black Range Rover with black glass, blacked out windows outside my home. And my dad came back about 2 to 3 hours later, he said, "It's still there. Are you okay?" Now that worried my father because we didn't know if there was anybody sitting inside it. And he came back. My dad drove past again for a third time, and he said, "Oh, it's gone now." And I said, "Yes, it'd gone soon after I'd put the phone down from you." So I don't know if they were sitting outside listening to the conversation I was having with my dad, but he did say on the phone, "I'm coming back to see if it's still there."
So one of these vehicles was
I don't know
managed
why.
to get it was traced to being MOD
Right,
MOD
yes.
intelligence,
and that was in the road. That was halfway up the road of the where I worked at the school.
Right. So do you put that surveillance down to the fact that your husband was causing a problem at Menwith Hill, or do you put it down to something else?
I think it was the amount of letters I was getting to the UFO Postman Network at my home address.
Okay.
That is another thing.
Right. So you were a focal point of UFO mail.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas I should have maybe had a post office box, I chose to have it delivered to my home address.
Okay. Now,
which I think had something to do.
Right.
with it.
Okay. So where were you living when this item came out of your nose?
I was living in Southall.
Southall. So
Yeah.
just tell us what led up to it. How did you notice it? Was it at night? Were you asleep, etc.? Just give us the story.
It's very difficult because it was back in '94, I think it was, and a lot of silly little things happened, unexplainable things happened. I had the incident that I mentioned earlier about having. It's very hard to explain, but I was basically losing blood every time I went to the toilet. And
this was prior to the time of the thing coming out your nose?
Prior to the time, yeah.
All right. So can I just ask a personal question? Have you ever miscarried at all ever in your life?
Possibly, I'm not 100% sure.
But you'd had problems in that, right? Okay. So you're what age at this point? Early 40s, sort of 40, 41, 42? Okay.
You know, my children, I was not planning on having any more children. I had strange growth growing inside of me, so I had to have a hysterectomy at 31.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right.
They couldn't explain what the mass was, but I had to have a very early hysterectomy, which put paid to any more children. I got my son and my daughter, so I was more than happy.
Okay.
And I am somebody that was told would never have children.
Initially,
because when I was born, my inside working bits weren't developed properly.
All right. Okay.
So I was actually with my first husband, under a doctor for infertility.
Right. Okay.
So it was quite a shock to end up with 2 children, but I'm quite pleased about that.
Good. All right. So you've had a hysterectomy, but you were still having some issues with that. Okay. And that was
because I thought it was a kidney infection, maybe.
Right. Okay.
And that's what the doctor treated me for.
Right.
And it cleared up and went away.
Right.
But then just after that is when I had a really, really strange dream. My husband and I were going through a difficult time in our marriage, and we were in bed one night, and normal night as far as I'm concerned. But at some point in the night, I woke up and I was in the back garden of the house I lived in Southall, and it was cold. It was sort of probably sub-zero temperatures that particular night, and I was standing looking in the garden at something up in the sky, which just was hovering. It was huge. It must have been the size of a football pitch, if not bigger, and it blanked out the sky.
Can you remember the shape of this object?
It was triangular.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it was definitely triangular, because I was at the back end of the pointed bit of this triangular shape was out of sight. It was that big.
Right. Okay.
And like I said, there was no stars. And once I realised what I was looking at, I woke up and I was back in bed, but I was freezing cold.
Right. Okay.
And I'm trying to wake my husband.
Right.
And I couldn't wake him up.
You couldn't wake him up. Okay.
Couldn't wake him up at all.
So, what happened then? Were you in night dress then?
I was in bed. I woke up sitting up in bed.
You woke up, so you'd had this dream. So tell us, so take it from there then.
Right, so eventually I did manage to wake my husband up, but he said, "Oh, just go back to sleep, just go back to sleep." and I was my whole of my skin was cold,
Right.
and that was so vivid.
Right.
You
So
know.
you think it's actually possible that you may have physically been outside?
Quite possibly.
Right. Okay.
There's
So-
a flat roof underneath the bedroom window,
Right.
so I would have had to gone through 2 doors to
Right.
get out into the garden,
Right.
but that was all locked up. So I
Right.
went down and I checked.
Right. Okay. So how long after that did you have the thing come out your nose then?
It gets better.
Okay.
It gets better.
Don't be.
Soon after that incident where, my husband said, I can't, we can't share the same bed, this is ridiculous. I've got to go to work in the morning, you're keeping me awake because you keep waking up, in a panic.
Mm-hmm.
So for a few nights after that, he went and slept in the spare room.
Yeah.
And I had another dream where I woke up and this thing was on the bed, striding me. It was standing there, it was horrible.
Right.
It was like leathery looking. I
Right.
can't describe it except it had like a horn on its back.
Right. Okay.
And it sort of had its, I suppose you could call it arms, on its hip area, and it was just standing there looking at me, and I'm sort of laying between its legs.
Right. Okay.
And again, I sat bolt upright in bed, nothing there.
Right.
And then it must have been a matter of days later, I was back down the doctors because I'd been to work, and I'd said to them, I really don't feel well. I've got to go home. I said, I've got to get my clothes off because my skin down below is very, very uncomfortable. I've just got to get my clothes off. And I went home and I had a look down below, and all the insides of my legs were bright scarlet. Anyway, after sort of sitting in the bath and soaking, my mum came over and she said, I really do think you need to see the doctor about this.
So was this immediately after you'd had this
This was a couple of
vision
days
this
after
creature?
this thing
Couple of
standing
days.
in the middle of the
Right.
bed.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and my mum said, I think you ought to go to the doctors. Well, when the doctor saw me the following day, obviously the condition had got worse.
Right.
And she said to me, you have got second-degree burns there. Have you dropped anything in your lap, like a hot cup of tea, anything at all? And I said, no. And she said, well, have you done any, the usual questions, have you changed all your soaps? Have you, are you using different body wash and whatnot? No. I said, the only thing that I've done different was put something in the washing machine to make the water softer.
Right.
So she took that away and they tested that and they said it wouldn't have caused the problems
Right.
that I'd got. And she said it was probably no more harmful than sitting in a Radox bath,
Right.
But had tests done, it wasn't that caused the problem, but I literally had raw skin that went from my private parts down to almost the knees.
Right.
On the insides of my legs.
Okay.
And she gave me some medication for it, and it cleared up miraculously. She said, I want to see you in a week's time. Well, I went back 2 days later. You wouldn't have thought there was anything wrong with me.
Right. Okay.
Second-degree burns healing in a matter of hours.